And today my guest is Conor Daly. He's the current strength and power coach at Essendon Football Club, an experienced Irish strength and conditioning coach working in the sports industry, skilled in athlete development, strength coaching, speed and agility, and Olympic weightlifting. He's a strong communicator with professional coach with a Masters of Sport Science, focused in strength and conditioning from Edith Cowan University. His key topic today will be discussing the similarities and differences around preparing AFL to rugby athletes from a strength and power perspective. For those new to the podcast, our mission here at Prepare Like a Pro is to inspire aspiring athletes and staff with practical knowledge from some of the industry's most inspiring individuals and to strengthen the AFL community. If you like the show, please show your support by following us on Instagram and subscribing to the podcast. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Welcome, Conor. Thanks for jumping on, mate.
Thanks for having me, Jack. Appreciate it.
Yeah, looking forward to our chat. It's always good to talk shop in the weights room and conditioning side of things, mate. But take us, before we dive into what you're currently doing at Essendon and the elite sport that you're working across rugby codes, take us back to the very beginning, mate. What age did you discover you had a passion working with elite athletes and being a strength and conditioning coach?
Look, I probably was a little bit later than most people who kind of get into it. I had no idea coming out of school what I wanted to do. I think it was a bit of a reality check. I only had a few courses down to go to uni, and the one that I got was sports science. I mean, I liked sports, so I put down sports science, and I didn't really know much about it. I think at the time I had an idea of going through maybe doing PE teaching or physiotherapy afterwards, and at a later date, I think I was kind of into the idea of sports psychology, and just didn't really know what the route was going to be. And I mean, even through the course, loved the course, but just didn't see a pathway out of that. That was about 2008. I ended up going back and doing primary school teaching. So did a postgrad in primary school teaching, and did a year's teaching afterwards. And again, found out that wasn't my passion, but still didn't really know what my passion was. So I was about 25. I did a little bit of traveling after that, and ended up in New Zealand for the Rugby Union World Cup in 2011, just going as like a fan, punter, just to go and enjoy the festivities.
Yeah.
And while I was in New Zealand, I got put in touch with the strength conditioning coach, a mate of mine at uni, Darren Screen. He put me in touch with Blair Mills, who was the New Zealand Sevens strength conditioning coach. He's now with Toshiba in the Japanese competition. He's the HPM over there, but really good bloke and really good operator, and he just kind of invited me in to have a look at what they did, the Auckland-based New Zealand Sevens. And I think after that first session, I just knew this is what I wanted to do. I was doing a bit of personal training at the time, probably like yourself. I started off with a bit of PT stuff, and I just saw the level that these guys operated at, and was so impressed. And then was lucky enough then that he kind of gave me the opportunity to come in, shadow him, and then take sessions when he was away. And that was the start of it. So probably around 25.
Yeah. Oh, that's great to hear. That it resonates with me, mate, as well. It took me a little while to work out what I wanted to do in the industry. I knew I was passionate about fitness and health, but yeah, it took around the same sort of age, 25, 26, before I sort of found the love for elite sport. You mentioned that session. What sort of inspired you, and how did that penny drop sort of moment sort of click? Was it speed stuff that you saw? Was it the stuff they were doing in the gym? Was there any particular moment that you sort of recall that you knew this is something that you wanted to do?
I think I mean, I played sport and stuff growing up, and I played, inter-county Gaelic football, but it was very, like your standard basic stuff. You take your own warm-up, so you jog a lap. And then I saw the prep that these guys had, and it was just, whatever they were doing, and the mechanics of what he was taking them through in the warm-up instantly clicked. And it seems like a very basic thing now, but at the time I was kind of like, this is pretty impressive. And then I suppose some of the con stuff like MAS and things like that he was taking them through just looked to me like it had a purpose, whereas a lot of the conditioning stuff I'd been exposed to previously was a bit more, generic and made up on the spot. So I mean, not that that's the defining traits of a good session, but it was just that first session kind of stood out to me, that these guys were at a different level. And then the strength work went into the gym, and just the kind of professionalism that these particular athletes had. There were some top class sevens guys, and Charles Piatow was one of them. He went on to be an All Black, and he's playing in England now. But these guys were very obviously at a different level than what I'd seen before. That was it. It just kind of realized this is something I want to be a part of, and it's something I'd like to do going forward.
Yeah. And for the listeners tuning in that are on that path at the moment, they're not quite sure where they want to go with their career, what would be your advice in terms of finding that passion and having that light bulb moment?
Yeah, look, I suppose getting as much exposure. If you think that strength and conditioning is something that you want to do, then I think first of all, getting in and shadowing worthwhile coaches that you respect, or anybody really. You're gonna find things that you like and that resonate with you, no matter who the coach is. If it's for you, I think and then pursuing opportunities. After I did the New Zealand stuff, I moved to Melbourne maybe 6 months later, and just started reaching out to people. And one of the people I reached out to was a guy by the name of Brendan Whelan, he's working with development in Rugby Australia. He's doing a little bit of work with the Wallabies and Australia A at the moment. And he was just a PT in a gym, and he was doing a little bit of voluntary work. And I think probably similar to yourself and Murph, I came in under him, and then he moved up and I moved up, and that pattern continued. And that was the first time where I got to kind of take ownership of a program. So I'd say to people, get in and shadow and observe, and then kind of seek out opportunities to put your own spin on things and do your own programming.
Yeah, great advice, mate. It's I couldn't agree anymore in terms of just keep putting yourself out there and shadow under great coaches. And it's quite surprised how much an impact of just simply seeing an environment can have on you.
That's massive. Yeah, it can change everything. And I think you'll have all these different learning stages. And I think, I'm still pretty young in my career, and I've had so many moments where I thought, that's right, I've got the answers and
Yeah.
I figured it out. And then, a couple of months later, you realize it was a grain of sand at the beach. There's always, it's such a
100%.
cliche, but there's always so much to learn. And that's the beauty of it. That's the most frustrating part about this career, I think.
Yeah.
But that's also the beauty of it, is you're going to constantly evolve and constantly grow in the space.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned Blair Mills. What were some other strong influences of your career that have helped sort of shape the way you do things, from your methods, but also your coaching philosophy?
Yeah, so Blair was the first exposure, and then obviously Brendan was brilliant, giving me my chance, and he's gone on to be very successful. I suppose another coach I would have worked with after that was Nick Henderson. So he was the guy who I moved home after kind of a 2-year stint in Melbourne, but in the voluntary work, I'd worked with the Junior Gold Cup, which is an under-17s competition with the Melbourne Rebels, and one of the coaches there was Nick Henderson, and he sought me out maybe 6-8 months later when I was back in Ireland, and offered me the opportunity to head up the academy at the Rebels. And he would have been a big impact on me in terms of learning. It's not just about the gym, it's not just about the conditioning, it's about how it kind of ties back in, and looking at what they want to do with a game plan as a coach. So that kind of gave me a little bit of again, I thought I'd figured out the gym stuff, and then realized there's more to it. It's more about the football program and tying it all in. And then once I got into the Rebels, Bryce Kavanagh was the HPM there, who I'm sure you've heard of before, and he was an absolutely top class operator. He was the kind of fellow who you wouldn't go to him with a question unless you almost had the answer, because he'd fire it back at you and he'd grill you just as hard. So it made you really prepare and really think things through. And I still take a lot from the time I spent with him. And then Shane Lahan was he was the head strength and conditioning coach at that time as well. He came in a little bit after me, so I've been around longer than him, but he's a top operator. He's a really good fella, and I learned a lot from him about how he probably adjusted coming from a different environment, with Leicester Tigers, coming into the Rebels. You see, in his journey, it was something that kind of informed some of the decisions I made later on when I was changing codes and changing clubs. And then I suppose the last couple would be at the Sea Eagles. I worked with a guy by the name of Cam Ferguson, who was our rehab S&C, and he's a top class operator as well. He's now the high performance manager at the Gold Coast Titans. He just really showed me the the importance of setting a standard and holding that, and how players respond to that consistent standard and being pushed. He was really got the best out of the players in a time at Manly. And then Sean Murphy has been fantastic. He's always so generous with his time. He's a really good operator, and he's really helped me kind of transition from rugby league into AFL and understand the demands of the game. And I think the environment that he's created at Essendon has been top class. So, we've got great operators there, Alex Akajian as well, and Nick Kane being the head physio. Like they're just all good operators that created a really good environment.
Yeah, it's a fantastic journey, man. There's a couple of things that wouldn't mind diving into a little bit more detail, particularly the first one you mentioned early on there about, you feel like you start to develop confidence in how you do things in the gym and in the field in your sort of own silo. And then it opens up this world of, okay, how do I join the dots in terms of how does this transfer onto football performance and turning into a football program? For those listening in that may not understand what that actually means, what would that mean to you? Is that a thing that you're thinking about when you're designing your program? Is it how you communicate that program to the athletes so then they understand what this is going to help them with on the field? Or is it bringing the coaches on board from a buy-in perspective? Talk us about what that means to you in terms of helping the game plan and a football program.
Yeah, mate, that's a great question. I think it's probably a little bit of all of that. I think if I use Manly as an example, we had Des Hassler in there, and he wanted to play a certain way. He was very clear about the type of football he wanted to play and what type of team he wanted us to be. And it was gritty, and it was being able to grind, and it was being able to wear teams down. And I think then understanding that, knowing that, we kind of supplemented some of our strength work with strongman circuits or circuit work or things like that, where it's less about developing maximal strength or power, or really doing things really clearly by the book, and just about staying in it and developing a little bit more of a mental resilience. So that's part of it. And then I suppose when you're in the gym and you're I think you're going through your exercises, and some exercises resonate more with athletes than others, and they don't. Some guys don't like buying into the accessory work, or some guys don't like buying into the big lifts. And if you can sell that back, if you can give them examples of where that'll be beneficial to them, or how that'll help them, or where it ties into the game, then I think it's always an easier sell. It's I think you don't always have to explain everything. Sometimes it could be a waste of time, but you don't have to always explain in big detail. But if you can kind of tie in what you're doing, and to the why and how that'll benefit them, I think it's always beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And the other thing that stood out to me was that how by working with Shane, it helped inform and seeing how he changed codes, how it's helped your transfer from rugby to AFL. It's a pretty common thing, and probably one of the best things about an S&C is we're not stuck to like a tactical coach where you're either a soccer coach or a football coach or rugby. You've got to stick to your sport more or less. We get to spread across all sports, which is a great thing, and definitely seems to be something where the industry is going. And it's almost a strength to have a team that's adverse across all different sports to lean on. What are some of the important things that you've learnt during your time in changing from rugby to AFL?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, again, we'll touch on it a little bit, but the similarities and differences. But it's a lot of things are a lot more similar than what you'd imagine. I think, going back 8-10 years ago, I would have thought the strength program for an AFL team and the strength program for an NRL team and a rugby union team would be chalk and cheese, and they'd be totally separate entities. Where a lot of the stuff is pretty similar. It's more about looking at the game, looking at the demands of the game, looking at the athletes in front of you, and addressing that with your programming. I think the learnings from Shane that I got from Shane were probably being yourself and being consistent, and being true to who you are as a coach. I think, as cliche as it sounds, I think that was something that he did. He was pretty. I think he can be quite critical of himself, I think, in terms of how he handled it. But I thought he came across very genuine, and he got buy-in immediately because of that. And he drove a high standard. And obviously there can be other issues with how, with coming in and not maybe acknowledging what's come before you. But I always thought that, you know, the way he presented himself, the players, it really resonated with the players, and they took things on board because of that. So that's something I tried to carry through, and just um, be myself, and you know, be honest and true to that. And I think that resonates with people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well said, mate. And reflecting on your career today, what would be some highlights that spring front of mind that you're proud of?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about that lately, and it's it's not the obvious stuff. It's not the kind of, you know, the I mean, the big wins or things like that. I mean, going back as far as the sevens, I think doing a little bit of work with one of the blokes there and helping him to learn how to swim. The boys had a swimming session, and um, some of the lads were flying again, some of the lads were up and down, and they were well able to do it, and then he couldn't swim. So, you know, teaching him how to swim is something that still stands out kind of 10 years later. I think probably the big thing would be kind of the relationships. They're the things I'll take with me. I think we were quite successful. We had a great squad with the under 17s Junior Gold Cup team with the Rebels that I mentioned earlier. And we got to the grand final, and we ended up losing. But it was probably, again, the people you worked with, the relationships you had. Like, I've still got that really close friendship with Nick Henderson. We had some great players in that squad who, it's been so great watching their journey since. I think there were three Wallabies, maybe four Wallabies: Rob Valetini, Rob Leota, Jordan Ulisse, and Pone Thomasuli, where they would have come through that period, and they're now Wallabies. And you know, we had another bloke, Jacob Lordy, who's now kind of a Hollywood A-lister. He's gone on to do a different thing altogether. But just keeping track of those people and seeing how they evolve, I think that's probably something I take. I think at Manly, it's funny, the worst year we would have had in terms of performances, and in terms of where we finished on the ladder. We got we lost a lot of games. I think we came second from bottom, but we beat Melbourne in Melbourne, and we beat the Brisbane Broncos in Brisbane. And again, just the relationship with those players at that time, it was just a fantastic thing, something I still look back on, and still have, you know, the kind of enjoyment they got out of those wins and what we took from it. I think they were huge. And then probably this year, I mean, again, it's a year we want to improve on at Essendon, but I think being a part of the Queen's birthday game against Collingwood is just that experience. Just being on the sidelines, you're not even out there, sitting on the sidelines and getting goosebumps with the atmosphere. It's pretty incredible. 100,000 people at the G.
Yeah.
Hard to replicate.
Yeah, I can imagine. And on the flip side, mate, some challenges that you've faced, and how have you grown from it? What have you learned from those challenges?
Yeah, I think so. Probably, I mean, one of the obvious ones would be changing environments. So going from, let's say, the Rebels to the Seagulls, you're starting fresh, and then going from the Seagulls across to Essendon. I think, you know, even within that, we had a transition at Manly, where we had a new head coach came in after 2 years, and new staff along with them, and that transition can be pretty daunting. I mean, it's you know, yourself, sport is a tough one. It's an environment where it can be quite volatile. But again, I think if you're consistent and you're pretty honest and pretty open, and if you're just yourself, I think that can definitely help with those things. Like I said, I think the other big thing would be probably, again, from a younger days through to now, is putting your ego aside and putting insecurities aside. So either you think you know it all, or you're worried that you don't know anything. I think putting that aside and realizing that it's okay to ask people for help, to talk to people about things, and really, I think you know, that's where having a good network and having good mentors is invaluable, and then having a really good department around you is huge as well, because they'd be the big things. That they're the big wins, I think, is just having those people to bounce ideas off. And then I think another challenge is just another learning is probably respecting what's come before you. So whatever environment you come into, you don't try and change everything at once. I think that was something that Bryce kind of hammered into me early doors, was, you know, you pick three big things maybe, and you identify those three big things that you'd like to change or impact, and then you build on that. And then year by year, you know, you build that out until you know, eventually your program looks like what you envision. But I think you definitely have to respect the person, what the person who was there before you has done, and build on their successes rather than trying to do everything yourself.
Yeah, it'd be good to touch on that a little bit more. Have you seen, obviously Bryce drilled it in, but have you seen a situation where too much change has happened in a year, and what are some of the side effects of that for the coaches listening in? To be aware of lots of change.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the biggest one would be, again, when we had a new HPM, a new staff at Manly, following the new head coach coming in, and just I think the first year of any new performance staff, you're going to get little things pop up. So there's going to be some sorts of changes. So we had kind of new conditioning, a new outlook on conditioning and things like that. And we didn't have any major issues, but I think it was just, you have to have an awareness that things will pop up, and it's not to be too reactive to those things. I think if you expect that first year is always going to be a little bit of a tricky one. So I think that's why anytime I see a new head coach or new HPMs or things go to a club, and there's going to be a lot of change, I wouldn't get too down on them if they're not instantly successful, because I think that they're just going to lay the platform in that first year for the future success. But I think you have to be aware of that, and again, respect what's come before you, and otherwise I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of soft issues.
Yeah, no, well said, mate, and thanks for sharing. And in terms of coaches going into a new environment, we're sort of at that time of year where people are moving around, and there's a lot of change at this, in October, for team sports, pro sports. When you're going into a new environment, you mentioned three big things that you really focus a lot of your energy on in doing well in a new program, and try not to do much more than that. How long would you spend in the program before you come up with those three things, or are the three things that are sort of your non-negotiables from a philosophy point of view that no matter where you go, you're going to take with you?
Yeah, probably. I mean, probably a little bit of both. I think going in initially, it'd be good to have an idea of what your identity is as a coach, and what are the things that you'd like to see, and then you see what's kind of gone on before. I mean, obviously, starting a new role, you've got to talk to the people who were in there before you, so you'll have a fair idea going in of what may or may not be in place that you like, and then it's just probably have your non-negotiables, or have the things that you'd really like to get in there to some extent, and then think about how you can kind of build that across. Obviously, I think there's a reflection period. I think we always have to reflect, daily, weekly, yearly, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, but I think especially those first couple of weeks, you'll go in, you'll try things, try a few of those big rocks, and reflect on the success. And it may mean kind of tempering your expectations and what you can get done, and you might have to change those plans a little bit. But I think having that flexibility is kind of key anyway in our industry. Whether that's because coaches get overzealous on the field and they want to, I think flexibility with our programming is pretty key across the board.
Yeah, for sure. Moving into your key topic, mate, the similarities and differences from preparing AFL athletes to rugby union, rugby league. Starting with AFL, what would be some key considerations from a strength and power perspective?
Yeah, look, I think like I said before, I'll probably just touch on the similarities are more evident than the differences, really. And I think it's, again, looking at the game plan of the coach and the demands of the sport. First and foremost, I probably would have anticipated a lot more differences coming across, and even in terms of culture, I was worried that potentially players would be adverse to lifting, or might not be as big on the gym or the strength work as potentially they had in rugby union and league, where it's embedded. It's part of the it's part of the fiber of the sport. But I was so pleasantly surprised that there was a really good lifting culture at Essendon, and we've been able to build on that. I think the differences, the similarities, first of all, are kind of you're going to try and increase tissue tolerance, look to improve strength and power output, look at movement mechanics and improve on them, and probably just so again support that game plan. The big differences would be, I suppose, in league you have the luxury that guys want to put weight on and keep weight on, and it's probably the battle you have in season is guys tend to lose weight as they go along, and you're trying to keep that weight on them. So you're trying to get as much volume into some of them as you can, and I have to say I have a lot of respect for some of the boys that come in on a Monday, they'd be absolutely bashed up, but they'd still get high volume upper body session. They couldn't lift their arms over their heads, but they'd still get as much upper body volume in as they could, because they knew that they had to going into the following weekend just to keep that in. I think in AFL it's obviously a little bit different because of the high volumes on feet. You have to respect that the impacts that increasing body weight can have on that, just with just overuse injuries and things like that. So I think that's a big one. It's having that awareness. So rather than trying to just get as much weights into them as possible, it's more about kind of selecting exercises and rep schemes, etc., to kind of maximize strength and maximize power. So getting as much bang out of what they already have, rather than just trying to build muscle. So probably need to be a little bit more keyed into those athletes, and they can be quite responsive to a lot of things as well. I suppose, again, like I said, it's weight training is ingrained into rugby and rugby league. It's just part and parcel. It's it's going back as long as the sport's around, and you probably have a little bit less time in AFL, so you kind of need to again maximize your time in the gym. It probably sits a little bit lower on the totem pole, but still just as important. So it's probably about getting little micro doses in for your mechanics and things like that in other places. And then I suppose because of the lower running volumes in rugby league, you can probably push in the gym a little bit more. You can kind of go for those 1 or 2% heavier in the lifts, whereas again it's more of a risk reward balance in AFL. If you push somebody too much in a trap bar deadlift or a squat, and they pull up a little bit sore, and it affects their running, and there's a lot more of a knock-on effect than potentially it would have in your rugby.
Gary Howard, who's tuned into the live, has just written in a question on this topic. How do you balance between strength and speed in rugby?
I suppose the luxury we had at Manly was we had a speed coach for the last 3 years. So we'd always try and tie in, I suppose, again, same thing. I think strength and conditioning has evolved where it's not really in the silos that it used to be. So it's not like strength and speed. I think you're trying to collaborate and work together as much as possible. So we had a speed coach who took all of our work on field, and pre-season gets kind of 45 minutes a session. So getting a lot of work into the boys in pre-season, and then keep touching that in season. And then I'd get my hour in the gym most days. So it's probably a pretty equal balance. It's probably when it comes to in season, trying to maintain kind of the maximal strength and then your speed exposures as well. And we just work together to kind of collaborate on that and get as much trade-off as we could. So whether it's off the back of a strength exercise, they do an explosive effort or a plyometric effort, it's probably just tying the two in together like that.
And between the three codes, have you seen a program where lower body strength loads will happen before field? And what's your sort of philosophy now that you've seen AFL as well? Do you think there's a place for doing lower body power or strength before main training sessions in pre-season or even in season?
Yeah, I mean at Manly last year, so my last year at Manly, we did that. We did a little bit of power work pre-field, and then the players went out. I think probably exercise selection and the volumes you're looking at are the big thing. I mean, I think anything the players can kind of adapt to the majority of stimuli, but I'd probably be pretty selective in avoiding Nordics before I send the players out for kind of high speed exposures, things like that. But I think, if you're pretty clear, if communication again across the departments are pretty good, and you know what to anticipate on a field session, or you chatted to the conditioning coach or the HPM, and you know what kind of exposures they're going to get, there are probably ways to tie in. I think it can definitely be done. It's just a case of exercise selection, maybe not too many, limit the invasive exercises like a Nordic or calf raises, things like that, before they go out and do high intensity efforts on the field. But I
Yep.
think, look, it absolutely could be done. And it's probably just, again, what's the philosophy of the program? What do you want to get out of the program? Yeah, it's probably more discussion in the department and get everyone's input and thrash it out.
Yeah. And what was one of the, or some of the key motives for Manly at the time to bring that change in to the program?
I think it was just the the players were getting a little bit sluggish in the gym in the afternoon later on in the week for a power session. So
Yep.
just to kind of freshen it up and keep them, get the most out of it. We get the boys in um, and get the power lifts done, and then send them out to get a couple of speed exposures into the field session. So we found that it kind of sparked them up a little bit. But again, it was done gradually. It was, not something that we threw everything at once. Again, we respected what we had done the previous years, so we had to kind of manage that going in. But it was probably just more, yeah, just easing into it. I thought it worked reasonably well.
Yep. And touching on sort of the strength and conditioning side of things, if we're looking at sort of reducing or mitigating soft tissue injuries in the sports, how do the methods sort of, how are they similar in rugby union, rugby league and AFL, and how do they differ?
I think so far in my experience, it's been pretty similar. It's probably looking at the demands of the sport. So there's going to be higher incidences of potentially hamstrings in AFL or ACLs, things like that. So it's looking at the demands of the sport, no matter what sports you're in, and then just I think ensuring that you're kind of exposing the players to the appropriate stimuli or on the field and in the gym, and yeah, just getting appropriate recovery post session. I think yeah, it's probably a collaborative approach. Just again talking about it as a department, identifying what are the things, the individuals you have, what are maybe the patterns or what things we need to allow for, and I think it's pretty consistent across whatever sport you're in. It's just identifying the high risks and um, working together, communicating as a department, communicating with the medical department about what interventions to put in place and what things to really dial in on to mitigate those
Yeah.
risks.
Yeah. And for the strength and conditioning or high performance staff listening in, if you're preparing to work, or your goal, your dream is to work in one of these three different codes, would there be important skill sets that differ between the three, or do some of the key areas of skills from a sports science or strength and conditioning point of view, rehab, do they all sort of do they all assist you in working at this level?
Man, really good question. I think if I could go back and if I knew I was going to be on this path, I'd probably get cracking a bit earlier than 25, and I'd probably just try and get around as many sports as I could. I'd get down and learn from a really good athletics coach and learn about movement mechanics, and I'd probably get in and see what a gymnastics coach does, and probably get exposure to all the different field sports. I think the more sports that you can kind of get in and observe and see a good coach in kind of in practice, I think that's going to serve you. Again, there's probably more similarities across them all than there are differences. It's just the understanding of what are we trying to achieve, what are the demands of the sport. I think the big things, you always work back from that, and then what's the coach trying to achieve on the field? What are we trying to build them for? But it's probably a lot more similarities than differences.
Yeah. And for the developing footballers listening in, what excites you when, let's say the new Essendon draft picks that get drafted later in the month of November, what excites you when you start to see them moving on the field or in the gym that you think, oh yeah, we're going to have a pretty impactful player here?
Yeah, look, we've been pretty good pretty lucky with our draft picks this year. The boys they're all sponges. So I think first and foremost is being receptive to everything and soak up and take on as many good habits as you can. Everyone's going to have a different background in lifting and even different footy levels. But I think first of all, being receptive. So if you're a young footballer coming in, just being receptive, soaking things up and kind of picking up as many good habits around prep and that sort of thing as you can. Working on movement mechanics is always going to help. So we get these young guys in the gym, and some take more work than others. I think if you get your mechanics down, if you're a good mover in the gym or on the field, before you get drafted, I think that's going to be a huge help. That's something I definitely recommend. And then just good habits around recovery, sleeping well, eating well, hydrating well, all that kind of stuff. They're the little simple one percenters that you can shape a career around. Obviously, I think it all comes back to footy ability. So footy is number one, but if you can work on things like mechanics and good recovery practices, good habits, I think you're setting yourself up for a longer career and a more successful career.
Yeah. And a question for the parents, there might be a few parents listening in of young footballers. What age would you recommend sending their father, their son or daughter to the weight room with a coach working on the technique, or maybe at an athletics track working on their running technique? What age do you think they should start from a strength and conditioning point of view?
That's a great question. I wrote an article on this before, and I got kind of pulled up on by the editor. He wasn't thrilled
Really?
with my answer on that. Yeah, that's gone back a while. Look, I think I mean, I don't have the articles in front of me or anything like that, so I don't want to kind of give too many specific numbers. But
We'll have to source it.
Kids need to be kids. I think kids need to be kids, and they need to just get out there. And I think that's probably one of the best things they can do is get kids off the iPads and off the couch and get them out in the world doing all the things that I'm going to lump you in a bit, but like all the things we would have done as kids, or certainly my age group, we didn't have any technology, so we were just out running amok. I think that's a big part of it. And then I suppose once you're kind of starting to grow into yourself and you know, I suppose you're ready to, once a kid is kind of ready to start switching on, probably those early teens, things like that. I'd be wary of taking a childhood from a kid, but it's going to be case by case, I suppose, as well. I don't want to kind of be too concrete on numbers there, because I'd like to have the research in front of me, but yeah, I can't see the benefit of getting kids in, you know, prepubescent. I can't see that outweighing I can't see the benefits outweighing the negative aspects.
Yeah, so be very much guided by how much your child is enjoying the activities.
I think enjoyment has to be first. Yeah, like the longer that these kids, I think, like, again, number one is we've got a lot of, we're talking about it from an elite sports point of view, and we're you know, that's obviously really important. But I think the reality is not everyone's going to be a professional sports person, but everyone can be an active adult if they're kind of given the right introduction to sports and activities, and they kind of grow a love for it, rather than if you go too serious too early, they may kick on and be successful as a result, or they may just pack it in and not enjoy it and walk away, and then you've got, you know, all the negative aspects that come with sedentary lifestyles.
Yeah, no, well said, mate. Yeah, thank you for sharing it. I sort of sprung that one on you as well, so sorry about that.
Got me. Yeah.
No, that was great. Thank you for the insight. Moving over to a bit of a lighter side, bit of a get to know you, Conor, mate. What's your favorite thing to do on your day off?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't have a partner or any kids or anything, so I mean, my time is kind of my own, which, you know, probably isn't a good thing either. But I enjoy my training, so I try to get down to the gym or go for a run most days off. Get out and play a bit of golf. I've got a game teed up tomorrow with a mate, so looking forward to losing a few golf balls. Just try and get out and about. I think the beauty of living in Australia, and why I, you know, love living in this part of the world, is the kind of the outdoor lifestyle. Getting to the beach. I'm lucky enough to live in Port Melbourne, so the beach is close by. So get in for a swim, even though Aussies find it a little bit cold this time of year. I'm okay. So the Irish genes are strong. So yeah, just getting out and about and just kind of enjoy my time and catch up with mates and things like that.
Yeah. And what about on the flip side, mate? What fires you up? What are your work life pet peeves?
Yeah, I'm reasonably easygoing. I suppose things like a quote that stands out to me is like the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, and that kind of, you know, if the lads leave the gym messy, I'm kind of try to be pretty hard on them with that. I'll chase them up and get them back to pack down, and by and large they're pretty good. But yeah, I think making sure that the facilities and stuff are respected, I think that's always one. And then probably timekeeping. I'm pretty I'm a bit of a stickler for the boys being on time, and you know, make sure they're there a minute early rather than a minute late. And yeah, unless they've got a valid excuse, maybe the two big things.
Any punishments that you spring out with those two
The
pet
boys had a good
peeves?
one this year. We had a wheel. There was a wheel, spin the wheel kind of thing. So
Oh yeah,
there was
yeah.
a couple of interesting ones on that. I think we had one or two gym sessions where Will Snelling was in his budgies for one of the gym sessions, which I think he was pretty happy about. He's, you know, any excuse to get the rig out. But yeah, there's a few little punishments there, but I think the boys were really good. Mac Wilfie was the main man heading that up, so he held them to a good standard with that one.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you sort of answered two questions in one. I was going to ask what your favorite quote or life motto is, but
yeah, no, well, look, the standard you walk past and the standard you accept. I think another one, Roy Keane, I think stole it from Benjamin Franklin, but failed to prepare to fail. I think you kind of set yourself up for positive or negative by how you prepare for things. And I think that's something that every aspiring professional athlete should take on board. And then tying in with that one is probably another pretty cliche one, but like hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. I think I think it was I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a basketball coach. I think Kevin Durant kind of stole it, but they're just two things. I think, again, going back to our young aspiring footballers and our young professionals, I think they're two things that put that in your locker and kind of always put your best foot forward. Always come in with an open mind and ready to learn and to grow, and it'll stand to you. You'll have a longer and more successful career, I think.
Yeah. And before we start to wrap it up, mate, going back to your topic, was there anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to share in terms of the differences or similarities in preparing athletes for those three different codes?
No, I'm pretty happy. I think I've got most of it across there. I think, like we said, it's probably just looking at whatever sport, whatever code, whatever setup you're in. It's just looking at the demands of the sport, looking at the athlete in front of you and what their kind of strengths and possible deficiencies are, and then working from that. I think whatever coach is taking a group can take something from that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on, Conor, and sharing with us your coaching journey to date, and being so open and honest as well, and giving us a great insight to what it's like to work across three different codes. There wouldn't be many people that have done it in the strength and conditioning industry. So to speak to someone directly has been massively insightful for myself and no doubt the listeners as well. What's on the horizon for you for the rest of 2022, mate?
Yeah, it's just looking forward to kind of getting back in and getting into preseason with the lads. It's been a long break, so I've kind of been keeping in contact with them and catching up every now and again, but looking forward to just ripping in, attacking it, and getting stuck into 2023 when the season rolls around. Looking forward to seeing you on the sidelines.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise, mate. Thank you. And for those tuned in as well, thanks, Gus, for your question. Hopefully, no doubt you enjoyed the answer. For anyone that tuned in halfway through, make sure to watch the recording. We've got it on our YouTube channel, and then we'll post it. We'll publish on our podcast over the next couple of weeks. But thanks again, Conor. Really appreciate you coming on, mate, and sharing with us your coaching journey and the similarities between rugby and AFL.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, Jack. Appreciate it.
Cheers, mate. And our next live chat for those listening in is with Phil Morland this Thursday at 1 p.m. I'll